ESPN just named Cooper Flagg the number one player in college basketball, but will he even be the leading scorer on his own team?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Friday and happy November, and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Shade, and you are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. And now here in the month of November, as college basketball is officially just about back. This is our final episode before an actual game day. So excited to be talking about real basketball games very soon. Folks, want to thank all of you who have made this show your first listen or your first watch of the day, and give a special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us on the Locked On College Basketball Discord channel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, place your first $5 bet and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Well, this is our third annual, I cannot believe this, our first episode that we did, or it was our first or second episode ever of Locked On College Basketball was a bold predictions episode. This is now going to be the third time that we have done that, getting into our third season on the show. So happy, honored, thrilled, excited to be back doing this one more season here. It's always been fantastic to have this opportunity. And it always makes, the bold takes always makes me happy because of that, because it reminds me that this is how we started our career here doing this Locked On College Basketball show. So folks, just as a reminder how this will work, each of us will do one prediction per segment. So we'll have 6 total bold predictions. We prepared these independently, so we did not look at each other's predictions until we had ours written out. Lots of different stuff here. Going to talk about some Big Ten teams, going to talk about some SEC teams, going to talk about some mid-major teams, all sorts of good stuff. But Isaac, we're starting with the prediction you made about the Duke Blue Devils.
Yeah.
I'm ready for you to kick this thing off.
Andy, I feel like I'm usually kind of 5 out of 10 on boldness. I think this is the bold prediction I've ever made of our 3 years, and I'm just leaning into it because I think it's fun and could actually mean good things for Duke. And here it is. Kon Knueppel, not Cooper Flagg, will be Duke's leading scorer.
Ooh.
Okay. Hear me out.
Happy to.
There is precedence with this. Let's go back to the 2018-19 Blue Devils team, where you had RJ Barrett as the number 1 player in the class, Cam Reddish number 2, Nasir Little number 3, and Zion Williamson number 4. It became clear and evident early and quickly that was very, very wrong, and Zion was obviously the best. Now, I recognize this is a different beast. Cooper Flagg feels more of a sure thing, but that's why it's a bold prediction. What are we doing here if we're not being bold? Here's a couple of the reasons I think why this could be a thing. Teams are going to absolutely load up their defense to stop Cooper Flagg, anything they can to do so. And I think Kon Knueppel is going to be the happy recipient of it. Andy, we've heard thing after thing after thing from their preseason about how great Knueppel has been. I was already a fan of his, but then hearing all those reports has made me even more bullish on this. I think Knueppel is actually going to be a more consistent scorer than will Cooper Flagg be. In their 2 exhibition games, Knueppel has 17 and 19, led the team with those 19 points against Arizona State. Meanwhile, Flagg had 22 against Lincoln, but then 9 in that Arizona State game where he wasn't, didn't have as good a shooting day in that game. Andy, I think part of it is that Flagg's strong suit isn't creating for himself. He scores a ton of points, but not in shot creation, for example. Now, hear what I'm not saying, folks. I am not saying that Kon Knueppel is going to be Duke's best player. I do think that is Cooper Flagg. I'm saying I think Kon Knueppel will be Duke's leading scorer, even if marginally so. Think about Kentucky last year, even as we think about rankings. Justin Edwards, Aaron Bradshaw, DJ Wagner. Those are your top 3 ranked freshmen on that team. Who was 4th and 5th? Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepherd. They
Yes.
were both higher than any of those other three. So there's all sorts of precedents for things like that. But Andy, you know what the biggest reason for this is? Kon Knueppel's last name starts with a K. That is what means that this prediction is meant to be.
I like it. I could honestly see it. I think Flagg is going to command a lot of attention from opposing defenses. Not that Knueppel won't, but I think it'll be his ability to space the floor. He's going to be a catch and shoot guy, but he can also attack the rim. I think you're just going to see him have enough versatility in how he scores the basketball that I think because of that, because defenses are going to be focused on Flagg, because defenses are going to have to crash the paint on Maluak. Like I just think that's enough that it's going to create situations where Knueppel's going to get a lot of open looks, and that could absolutely result in him being, again, I think it's going to be pretty balanced between him,
yes,
Flagg and Proctor and others. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if this ends up becoming a reality. But it is one of your bolder predictions. So
it is bold. It's
well
bold.
done in that
I'm owning
regard.
the boldness of it. All right, Andy, what's your first bold prediction, my man?
Yeah, I'm going with a prediction regarding the NCAA tournament. I think the SEC is going to tie the record for the most teams from a specific conference in the big dance. That would be 11 teams. I was close to saying they break the record, and honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if that happens either and they get a full 12 in, but I'm going to stick with 11, which was set by the Big East back in 2011. But the second part of
when they had more than 11 teams.
Right. Yeah. Now that would be the entire conference. The second part of this prediction is not only will the SEC get 11 teams in the NCAA tournament, only one of them will advance to the Elite Eight. We'll talk about who I have in that prediction, but part of this prediction is just simply that this record's going to get broken. The Big East record is going to get broken, whether it's the SEC this year or not, because conference realignment is creating these big bloated conference. It's easier to get, 10 or 11 or 12 teams in the NCAA tournament when your conference has 18 or 20 teams, as opposed to having 14 or 15 or something like that. And so the Pac-12 being dispersed among a handful of other conferences, the SEC obviously getting bigger, and then other factors like the NIL and transfer portal has created these leagues that have a ton of money. They have a ton of teams, and it's just going to be a situation where you're going to see 10, 11, and potentially 12 teams from certain conferences get in the NCAA tournament very soon. I think the Big 12 is going to get 9 this year. I feel very confident about 9 being pretty much the minimum for the Big 12. But I think the SEC gets 11. And to me, I see 7 teams that there's never a lock before a game has been played, but 7 teams that feel very, very likely to be in. And that's, of course, Bama and Auburn, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Texas, Arkansas, and Florida. Those 7 teams feel like things would have to go pretty darn wrong for them to not be in. Then I got 3 more teams: Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Kentucky. People can grub whether they should be in the lock category or not. Doesn't really matter. Those 10 teams, I think, are in. So then you just need one more team. And out of South Carolina and LSU and Oklahoma and Missouri and their successful transfer portal class, and even Georgia, out of that group, and yes, that means I have named every team in the SEC except Vanderbilt. Sorry, Vanderbilt. But one of those teams is probably getting in. So to me, that's how you get to 11. And my second part of this prediction, there's enough concern about most of these teams to have some hesitation about them getting into the Elite Eight, into the Final Four, into that national championship conversation. For Bama, it's their defense. I know they made it last year, but it's still something that I'm concerned about, even with the addition of Cliff Omoruyi in the front court. Tennessee, it's their shooting. Depth is a concern for me with Texas and Texas A&M. It's also a bit of a concern for John Calipari at Arkansas and Chris Beard's Ole Miss team. Auburn, I think, is the most balanced team out of this group, but I do have some concern about their backcourt in particular, not having a lot of NCAA tournament experience. So between all of that, I feel like there's enough questions about whether these teams will advance as far as they need to, or as far as they'll be projected to. The one team I do have advancing to the Elite Eight, give me Todd Golden's Florida Gators. Give me this Florida team. I love Walter Clayton. I think that we've seen Todd Golden is fantastic with guards. The development of guards in his systems dating back to San Francisco and his first few years at Florida have been fantastic. We'll see what the front court looks like. Alex Condon to me is a big hinge, but I think if he kind of develops into the player he's capable of being, I could see this team making a nice run in March. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. I think you see Florida be the team that advances the furthest out of these SEC teams, but I do think they also tie that record and get 11 teams in the dance.
Andy, I was sitting here prepared to respond to the 11 teams and what and all this. Holy smokes, Florida as the only team to the Elite Eight. My man, you
buried
buried
the lead on that one a little bit, huh?
Get Brandon Olson on the phone, the great host of Locked On Gators. This is the bat signals going out. This is bonkers, Andy. That is wildly bold, and I'm here for it. If that comes to fruition, you, my man, will have a gold star in your crown for heaven. Andy, this is a great bold prediction. I love that it's kind of a parlay, both the number of teams and only Florida getting to the Elite Eight. That's great stuff there. I love this. I love it. I love it. And I'm really curious to see out of those 5 for one spot as your 11th. I'm curious to see who that would be. You know, maybe it is those incoming freshmen and transfer portal class at Mizzou. Maybe it is Demery or somebody at UGA. Done. So, man, they're going to be really interesting to see what happens there. We're kicking it off. Bold predictions are off and running, folks. We're already a little bit crazy here, which is a reminder to say we'd love to hear your bold predictions. Please make sure to share those with us on the Discord or in the YouTube comments, anything like that. Now, Andy, we've talked a good deal about this preseason already, how now that Zach Edey's gone, suddenly the Big Ten feels very wide open, and we each have a bold prediction, ironically enough, about who could challenge for the top spot, and that's coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about 5 Hour Energy. Hey, our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan is not just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime. Or maybe if you're the Yankees fans right now trying to figure out how on earth your team could actually play some defense, which is why they've created Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. The energy shot made just for super fans like us, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. You know what's given us college basketball fan fuel this week, Andy? The fact that, as you said earlier, it is now November and we are just days away from the tip-off of the regular season. We're so geeked out and we can't wait to see new jerseys and not the state of New Jersey, because, you know, wow. But all the new jerseys and gear that you're all wearing. We need 5 Hour Energy to stay up for night one because we got late games to tune into. But 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. So whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or you're ironing that new jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why this limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy Shot, which is available at 5hourenergy.com and it's shipped nationwide. Bold predictions ahead of the college basketball season, the third annual version of it. We're hot into this thing with some interesting Cooper Flagg predictions, with some SEC tournament predictions. My good grief, I'm still reeling from that. And Andy, now funny enough, as Andy said, we do not share our bold predictions with each other before we get this ready. I love that we both came to this thing with a top end of the Big Ten prediction. So Andy, hit us.
Yeah, my prediction here for the Big Ten is that USC is going to finish in the top 3. And I debated top 5. I decided to go top 3 just to spice it up, just to make it a little bit bolder. There was a couple
this is called bold predictions. This isn't weak predictions.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. So we're going top 3 for USC. I thought about making this a 3 of the top 5 teams in the Big Ten are going to be from the old Pac-12. But honestly, UCLA and Oregon are both kind of projected to be in the top 5. So the only part of that prediction that's bold is that USC is among them. So I decided to just make it focused on USC and let's have it be about Eric Musselman's team. And this is a team that's been kind of overlooked. They haven't been given a lot of respect. I think the coaches poll, I think, had them 14th in the Big Ten. We're seeing them not get any attention even as a top 10 team in this conference. And I think it's just kind of a product of there being so much change. I mean, the USC was bad last year and they underperformed, but that's completely irrelevant to this current USC team. That's a completely different team, completely different coach, completely different conference. It might as well be a different team. Like there's no connection at all to last year's team. I think there's some concern about Eric Musselman had a huge transfer portal class in his final season at Arkansas and things did not go well. There was some team chemistry issues and it kind of fell apart. And sure, I can understand that being a relevant factor here, but this is a really good roster. And folks, they scrimmaged against Gonzaga in an exhibition game. And yes, Mark Few played guys 6 through 10 for a huge chunk of that first half. And these two teams were looking for different things. Gonzaga's trying to figure out their bench, and Eric Musselman was trying to figure out what his best lineup is, what his starting five looks like. So the result of that game, USC won by 3. It doesn't really matter because the two teams are trying to get something different out of it. But I watched this entire game, and USC did not look like a team of players who hadn't played together before. It was very impressive how cohesive they were, how connected they were. And I came away incredibly impressed from this group. This is a team that added the most points per game in the entire transfer portal. I think they added like 150 combined points per game from last year. Obviously, the more players you add, the more you're going to add to that total. But the main thing that really stood out to me outside of this team's kind of cohesion already before the season even begins, this team is huge. They are huge, and they're going to cause so many mismatches and so many problems for opposing teams in the Big Ten because of their lineup. This is who they went with as their starting lineup, and it's almost certainly who they're going to go with in the regular season. Desmond Claude was their point guard. He's 6'6", transfer from Xavier, averaged 16.5 per game last year. Chibuzo Agbo is their starting shooting guard from Boise State. He's 6'7", and he averaged about 14 and 5 while shooting 41% from Boise State. St. Thomas is their starting small forward. He kind of replaced Dalton Connect at Northern Colorado last year, averaged 20 points, 10 boards, and 4 assists per game for Northern Colorado. Now he's on a lot of NBA draft boards already as a 6'7" small forward. They start Terrence Williams, transfer from Michigan, who averaged 12 and 5 last year for the Wolverines. He's 6'7" as well. So 6'6", 6'7", 6'7", 6'7", and then you start a 6'10" center in Josh Cohen, transfer from UMass, who averaged 16 and 7. The main thing, though, is Cohen's a good 3-point shooter and a floor spacing big. So what we saw Musselman's team do, and what I think they'll do a lot this season, is pull the center away from the rim because Cohen can space the floor. So you're moving the opposing team's big man out away from the basket. And then you have Claude or Agbo or Thomas or whomever just post up. Throughout this game, Claude was posting up Ryan Nembhard, and Gonzaga could not do anything to stop it. Now, the Zags are not a great defensive team, and that's going to be an issue for them, but
sure,
they're going to be able to do this against everybody that they play. And the fact that they already seem to have that down, they seem to have the system in place. Like, I'm really bullish on this team, and they have good depth. They don't have a lot of front court depth. That's the biggest area of concern I have for this team. Kevin Patton is kind of expected to be their backup 4 or 5, but he's got some injury stuff, and latest report I've heard is that there's a chance he ends up having to redshirt. So if he's not able to be available for them, that hurts their front court depth. But this is a good team. They're a good shooting team. They're a big team, and they looked a lot more together than I would have expected a team that hasn't played together. And I know you'll touch on this in yours. The top of the Big Ten is wide open, and I don't see any reason why USC can't be one of the 5 and maybe 3 best teams in this conference in Eric Musselman's first year.
I love it, Andy. And I want to go back to something you said right at the beginning of your talk when you said, I feel like maybe a lot of people are just forgetting about USC. And I think for me, at least, it's because there was so much hype ahead of last year because you had some guy named Bronny James coming in. You had Isaiah Collier coming in as like the number 1 player in the class. You had Boogie Ellis coming back for that next year. You had Kobe Johnson, who was a dude, and they just sucked. Andy, let's not mince words. USC was bad last year. And so I think because there was so much hype and so much drop, everyone's like, forget it. I'm out until you do something. But and then beyond that, obviously Boogie Ellis is gone. Isaiah Collier's now in the NBA. Kobe Johnson. Kobe Johnson just went to the other LA school in the Pac-12, now Big Ten. And obviously Bronny is somehow playing with his dad in still LA, but for a different team, interestingly enough. Hey, he just scored his first points. Way to go, Bronny. Not literally right now, but recently. And so I think that's a big part of it, but I love it. And obviously you and I both think Musselman's a great coach and curious to see how this can go. So I love the boldness of this. I'm going to stay in a similar vein with my second bold prediction ahead of this season. Michigan picked 9th in the preseason Big Ten media poll, puts it all together, and wins the Big Ten regular season in Dusty May's first year. Yes, Andy, as you said, part of this is the Big Ten really does feel so wide open. I'm still not even convinced. I know we both picked Purdue. I know the preseason poll has Purdue. I don't feel great about that at all. And so I think that makes the Big Ten a lot of fun. Like I'm going to be all in on watching that. Part of this for me, I think Dusty May is a great basketball coach. I think he's going to be able to step in immediately, which is what you can do in this era. You don't have to wait till year 2, 3, 4 till you get your guys in, because you can get your guys in now. And literally, he has one of his guys in Vlad Golden, who I think is just going to be like prototypical Big Ten center, just manning things in my not Peyton Manning things, but manning the post. And I think in this world where it all comes together for Michigan and all the pieces fit, the Vlad Golden, Danny Wolf front court works to perfection. In reality, I'm a little concerned about it, but in this dream world we're living in, I think it works really well. Roddy Gale shines as a dude in the backcourt, bringing it all together. Trey Donaldson, Reuben Jones, they've both joined that trio in the starting lineup so far in Michigan's like exhibition games. They're going to do enough of what they need to do. I love some of these guys coming off the bench. Namari Burnett's still around. I think Sam Walters is an absolute dude who came over from Bama. I was really excited to see him with the Crimson Tide again this year. But Will Shedder, I think he's going to add some things. LJ Kaysen has been a nice surprise in Michigan's exhibition games. This freshman scored 20 in one of their exhibition games. But Andy, Michigan, I was looking back through the box score. Michigan played Oakland, the team that beat Kentucky last year. Of that 9 I just named, that was like the 9 minutes getters. 8 of them hit at least one 3-pointer in that game, including Sam Walters going 4 of 6. If they can do that to balance, like think about how Zach Edey had all that gravity last year, and it allowed Purdue to be a great 3-point shooting team. If I remember correctly, second in the nation percentage-wise behind Kentucky, funnily enough. If they can do a similar thing with that, no reason Michigan Wolverines cannot win the Big Ten regular season.
Yeah, I like this prediction a lot. I think Michigan is underrated at 9 for sure. I think they'll be a top 7, top 8, top 6 team.
Keep going, Andy, all the way to 1. You keep going.
I think they can. I absolutely think they can be top 5. And again, anybody who says they know for sure that a team's not going to be in the top 5, top 3 of the Big Ten, there's just no way to feel that confident about this conference. There's so many variables. There's so many new teams, new coaches, new rosters. Like it's going to be a really fun and kind of wacky season in the Big Ten. And I would put Coach May up there with everybody in that conference. I mean, maybe just behind like Matt Painter and some of the best coaches, but I'd put him up there with just about anybody.
He's good.
I think this is a great roster. I think this is a great coach. I think this is a program that could absolutely contend towards the top of the league. So I really love this bold prediction here. A couple fun ones for the Big Ten there. But Isaac, I want to move on and talk about John Calipari. We already kind of talked about Kentucky a little bit, but there was not a lot of consistency, particularly in the latter half of his tenure at Kentucky. But one thing that he did very consistently was put guys from his program into the league. And we're going to start to wonder if that's going to continue to happen in the Mark Pope era. We got a prediction about that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, let's talk about FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. And we have day 1 odds for college basketball Monday, November 4th. Gonzaga, 3.5-point favorites over Baylor at the Spokane Arena. Texas, 2.5-point favorites over Ohio State. We also have Memphis taking on Mizzou. They are 4.5-point favorites. I was going to say the Tigers, but the Memphis Tigers are 4.5-point favorites in that one.
Tigers going to win that game. Yes,
the Tigers are for sure going to win. Texas A&M is 3.5-point favorites over Central Florida. We're going to talk about it on Monday's show. Really excited that that's 4 better games than we've seen on opening day the last couple of years. So really excited to have some good basketball coming our way. And if you're like those odds, if you like any of the other odds, they got Wooden Award, conference winners, Final Four, national championship odds. Just visit FanDuel.com today and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Isaac, closing out our show, closing out our bold predictions episode, one of my favorite annual traditions here on Locked On College Basketball, our 3rd season doing so. We got 2 more predictions for you all, Mr. Shade. I'm going to have you started off with a prediction about those Kentucky Wildcats. Take it away.
For the first time since the 2009 NBA draft, the Kentucky Wildcats will not have any first-round NBA draft picks. And I guess I should really say that, look, I feel like this would be a bolder prediction if John Calipari was still around.
Right.
So it's a little bit less because of that. But yes, for the first time since the 2009 NBA draft was the last time that Kentucky didn't have a first round pick. This is the year that ends that streak. And honestly, if you want to get a little crazy, in 2007, Kentucky had no one picked in the NBA draft. I didn't go there because I do legitimately think Kentucky will have at least one second round draft pick, whether it's Jackson Robinson, whether it's, I think he's the most likely candidate, Andy. I think Brandon Garrison's there. I've heard quite a bit of buzz about how good Wake Forest transfer Andrew Carr has been in the lead up. So we wouldn't be surprised to hear some noise from him. But Andy, I mean, in reality, this might actually not be that bold, other than just the precedent of it. The fact that Kentucky has literally had at least one NBA draft pick every year of the John Calipari era in Lexington is almost bonkers and befuddling. But I went through and double checked it over and over and over again. Even the year where I thought about oh, what about the Enes Kanter year? Because he didn't actually play for Kentucky, but he was not the only Kentucky first round draft pick that year. So we're on good footing. But it just, as I was thinking through my bold predictions, I was I had a hunch about this, and I went back and looked, and sure enough, every year from 2010 through 2024, we've had at least one Kentucky Wildcat in the first round. And that streak, oh, by the way, in and of itself is wild to me that he was able to do that.
Yeah. And I agree that I think it's probably going to come to an end. I think Robinson's age alone would make it really difficult for him to play his way into the first round. I mean, we've seen, fifth-year guys play themselves into the draft the way that Antonio Reeves, a good example, if we're sticking on Calipari, that he did it, but he didn't play himself into the first round. It's really hard to be a fifth-year guy and be able to do that. Garrison is younger. Obviously, I think he's got the talent that if you told me that somebody from this Kentucky team is going to be picked in the first round in 2025, that's probably who I would guess. I'm glad you mentioned Andrew Carr because I could see it too. But Kirk Kriisa and Lamont Butler are both good players, but I don't see them as.
I don't see them.
I'm not sure I see them as NBA players at all, and I definitely don't see them as first round picks. Kobe Brea is a really good shooter, but is that enough to get him in the first round?
I don't think so. Yeah,
probably not. And it goes back to a conversation that you've had that we talked about recently when we talked about Rick Pitino, spending most of his offseason hanging out with Kentucky, and this Mark Pope era is kind of bringing back a different feel for Kentucky, a feel that we haven't seen for this program in Lexington since before John Calipari was there. And it's not that they're going to be worse. It's that they're not relying on those one and done superstar freshman types the way that they did under Calipari. And again, whether that is going to make them better or not, obviously remains to be seen. If Mark Pope gets this team in consistently into the Sweet 16, contending for some national championships, people aren't going to be as concerned about the amount of NBA draft picks that they're getting. But it definitely feels like this is a likely era that's coming to an end. But I'm with you on maybe not quite being ready to say they're not going to have anybody drafted, because I think Robinson and Garrison potentially feel fairly likely that they'll get in the top 60.
And Andy, let me quickly say, as you get ready for your final bold prediction, I think this is just a 1-year skid, because you look at some of those names that Pope's already got for the 25 class. Yeah, he's gonna have some first rounders next year. Anyway, Andy, hit us with the final bold prediction of this year's preseason.
This is the third time that I've made sure that one of my bold predictions is of the mid-major variety the last couple of years. And so I was kind of looking through who I wanted to talk about for my final prediction here. And I ended up going with the team in the American Athletic Conference, UAB, the Blazers. My prediction is that they win the conference, and it's crazy to predict how a team's going to do in the NCAA tournament at this point, but this is my second prediction doing so. I think they're going to make the Sweet 16. I think they're going to be a double-digit seed that goes on a mini run in the Big Dance. UAB under Coach Andy Kennedy last year, 23-12, finished fourth in the AAC, but won the conference tournament, earned a 12 seed, and narrowly missed upsetting San Diego State as in a 5-12 game and advancing. So they're already really close to doing this last year. They lost some key pieces. Eric Gaines is gone. Jevian Davis is gone. Those are two of their 4 leading scorers last year. Gaines was their starting point guard, but they keep Yaxel Lindeborg, and that is massive. He's among the best mid-major players in the country. He's their power forward, averaged about 14 and 11 last year. Also averaged over 2 blocks per game. In his last 16 games with the team, he just went insane. 16 and a half points, 12 and a half boards, 2.5 assists, 2.1 blocks. Was just a monster for them down the stretch. So they keep him. They keep a couple other 11-point per game scorers in Ephraim Johnson and Alejandro Vazquez. And they also added 2 big-time players in the transfer portal. Bradley Azewiro from St. Louis averaged 12 and 6 last year for the Billikens. They also had a smaller guard from Georgia Southern, Tyron Moore, who averaged 17 points and 3 assists and shot 40.6% from 3. So they got some shooting in the transfer portal. They got some veteran experience in the front court. They're in a conference where Memphis is in a lot of turmoil. That's a team they're struggling right now. They've got players complaining about their NIL money on social media. They got their entire coaching staff got canned like a month ago. Like there's some problems there. And unfortunately, there's also some concern about how this South Florida team is going to look coming into the season after the tragic loss of their coach, Amir Abdur-Rahim. They were projected to finish high in the conference, and we'll see what other teams. Wichita State is kind of going to be in that mix potentially. But to me, I think UAB feels like a very strong candidate to win the American Athletic Conference, win the conference tournament for the second year in a row. They'll probably be in an 11-12 seed conversation. And with their experience, having been in the tournament last year, I could see this team making a mini run. Obviously, matchups and things like that are going to matter, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is the mid-major team that kind of captures America's heart and goes on a little mini run and kind of turns some heads in the big dance.
Andy, I think that's so much fun, especially not just because UAB in a vacuum, but because of the Memphis of it, right?
Yeah.
Because of the other things like that. And so I think that makes a ton of sense to me to think about. That said, like, let me get your thought on this quickly, because I know we got to go. If that happens, is Andy Kennedy back to the power conference level next year?
Yeah, we've seen coaches do this. We've seen coaches kind of drop down to the mid-major level, have success, and come back up, but it does seem to take a little bit longer. If it was faster, Will Wade wouldn't still be at McNeese, for example.
Will Wade guaranteed to be Memphis's head coach next season, by the way.
Man, that feels like a
match made in heaven.
That's not even a bold prediction. That just feels like that's locked in. Bryce Drew is another one of a coach who has clearly had success at Grand Canyon, but hasn't quite gotten back to that power level because he did not succeed last time. So I do think that power conferences coaches or teams are a little bit more hesitant to bring coaches back who have not succeeded the last time. So I do think Kennedy might need to do a little bit more, but a Sweet 16 run, or especially if it becomes an Elite 8 run, I think he's going to start to get some looks. Or even if it's just like, hey, they make the tournament again, maybe you give him one more year. If they do it again, then you start to give him some serious attention. He's a very good coach, but I understand why teams are hesitant at this point.
I love it, Andy. Just thought I'd get your thought on that as we wrap up on UAB. Speaking of Grand Canyon, folks, if you do not remember the name Tyon Grant Foster, you need to buckle up, because them Lopes are going to be doing some work this year. And Bryce Drew, man, I'm excited to see what they're able to do. Folks, this is so fun. We love getting to do fun shows like this. Hope you enjoyed our bold predictions, and hopefully you thought they were crazy, because that means that we were bold in our takes. Again, as we said earlier, we want to know yours as well. What are you thinking about this season? There are over 360 teams in Division I, so surely you got a ton of takes out there that we didn't even get to. Make sure to share them with us. Again, you can do so by joining the Locked On College Basketball Discord, where we have great conversation all the time. It's free, and the link for that is in the show notes. Also, if you're not subscribed to the show on video and audio, that's another great way to make sure you don't miss a second of all the great college basketball action this season. It's always funny to be able to say it after a show talking about the whole nation. Apologies to the lawyer family. Let's go, all ye Wildcats out there. And until Monday, where we're previewing actual basketball games. Peace.